Has it really been that many years? Is my dad still alive? My ex-husband, whom I hadn't seen in a long time, approached me with a smirk, his voice dripped with sarcasm. Just a short while ago, he'd have done anything to avoid seeing me, so this sudden approach puzzled me. I wondered what had changed. I considered asking him directly but wasn't interested in hearing excuses about the past. From his perspective, I probably looked impassive. His irritation flared, and he snapped, "Well, aren't you going to say anything after all this time? Are you too shy to speak?" His absurd assumption made me chuckle inwardly. Not wanting any misunderstandings, I smiled and gave him the truth. "Why would I be shy? Your father recently passed away, and I inherited $7 million from him." The shock on his face was almost amusing. I couldn't help but laugh at his astonishment. "I'm Millie, a 48-year-old ordinary housewife. I live happily with my husband and take care of my father-in-law in our home. We married later in life and, due to various reasons, never had children. Sometimes I think it was for the best. I first met my husband over 10 years ago when my company, which I joined after university, competed against his company in a project. After our company won first place in the competition, he approached me at the celebration party. He was genuinely considerate and caring, and we quickly bonded. Despite our busy work schedules, we started dating. Eventually, he proposed. But life wasn't just about romance. His family consisted only of his father, as his mother had passed away when he was young. His father had been a reliable figure in a reputable local factory for years. However, shortly after he graduated from university and started his new life, his father lost his eyesight completely in a factory accident. Living alone became a significant challenge, and his father needed constant support. When my parents learned the situation, they strongly opposed our marriage. Despite their objections, he asked me with tears in his eyes, "I want you to help me support my father." His earnest plea touched me deeply. So, despite our parents' disapproval, we decided to care for his father together. He requested that I take a break from my job to help out, and we ended the contract with the caregiver who had been assisting us. I promised to assist with his father's daily needs, and thus began a new chapter in my life, one that, at the time, I approached with a bit of naive optimism. I accepted his request without much thought, and thus began my daily routine of caring for my father-in-law. However, I soon realized that caregiving was far more challenging than I had anticipated. What shocked me even more was how my husband had changed. Before we married, he was incredibly considerate and attentive, but once we settled into married life, he began to change. For instance, one evening when I was overwhelmed with the demands of caregiving and unable to prepare dinner, he quietly began eating a meal he had bought from a burger shop. While preparing dinner was my responsibility, a simple acknowledgement of my effort, like "it must have been tough for you" or "do you need help?" would have made a world of difference. After eating, he left his trash on the table and went straight to bed after a shower. His attitude made me feel isolated, as if I were merely a free helper in his life. This was how our life began. I wished we could communicate and understand each other better. Noticing the tension, my father-in-law gently held my hand and apologized. His kindness brought tears to my eyes. I acted like everything was fine in front of him and said it was okay, but inside, I felt differently. As the days went by, I continued to navigate daily life, struggling with his coldness. One day, I voiced my feelings to him, but he responded, "I'm just taking care of my own stuff," as if he didn't understand my perspective. His response only made me feel more distant. Over time, I gradually adapted to taking care of my father-in-law and managed household tasks more smoothly. As I spent more time with him, our bond deepened, but increasingly, there were nights when my husband wouldn't come home, and impromptu meals out became more frequent. I kept telling myself that it was just the two of us, my father-in-law and me, holding things together. Then one day, those words came out of nowhere, and something inside me felt shattered, leaving me with an overwhelming sense of loneliness. "Hey," he started, "lately you haven't been saying my name as often. It's been 2 years since we married, but somehow, the warmth we felt in the beginning has faded. I want to talk. Come to the living room." A naive hope bubbled up within me. Perhaps he was considering mending our relationship. My father-in-law, sensing the tension, had retreated to his room to give us some alone time. With a flicker of hope, I headed to the living room, where a piece of paper lay on the table. He glanced at me and said, "Sit here," and I quietly took the seat next to him. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized the paper. "You know what this is, right?" he said with a grin that lacked the warmth it once had. "I've already sent a petition for divorce to the court." His demeanor was infuriating, but I found myself staring at the paper instead of reacting. "If you don't respond to the court within 30 days, the divorce will be finalized. I just want out of this life." The words felt foreign and disorienting, leaving me speechless. I let out a surprised, "What?" His annoyance was palpable as he casually tossed a pen in my direction. "Do you even understand what I'm saying? I want a divorce. I'm starting a new life with the daughter of a company president, so I need you to speed up the proceedings." His frantic rambling felt like a roller coaster, twisting and turning my heart with each revelation. With all my father-in-law's care and household chores, this was a reality I was struggling to accept. Lately, I had been swamped with work, leaving us little time together. I never imagined that he was having an affair. Then, as I began connecting the dots, his changed attitude, coming home later than usual, and other signs, I struggled to accept the reality of his betrayal. When I thought about the bond we shared and the relationship with my father-in-law, I couldn't grasp how we had ended up here. His eyes were cold, and the determination in his words was unmistakable. Overwhelmed, I found myself at a loss for how to respond. After my father-in-law lost his sight, his hearing had become exceptionally sharp. He could detect even the faintest sounds in the house. Given the age of the home he built, it wasn't soundproof, so he must have overheard our entire conversation. For a moment, I considered seeking my father-in-law's help, but then I realized I couldn't expose him to this turmoil. Continuing in this way would bring no happiness to either of us. This thought weighed heavily on me as I picked up the pen he had tossed and began shakily signing the affidavit. "Finally getting it, huh? Good. Now I can be free," he said, as if it were a victory. "Before you took on caring for my father, we had a caregiver who left at night, so I had to care for him alone, waking up multiple times. It was hard, but after marrying you, I could finally sleep through the night." He spoke as if pleading his case, but I closed off my heart to his words. I no longer wanted to be swayed by him. After I finished signing, he quickly grabbed the papers, carefully checking each word. With a satisfied smirk, he looked at me before leaving the room. I heard him humming as he packed a large bag and hurried out of the house. Watching him leave, I felt a surge of anger and frustration, my cries echoing in the empty space. After he left, the house was enveloped in silence, leaving only me and my blind father-in-law. I lost track of how much time had passed before my father-in-law placed his hand gently on my shoulder. Despite his blindness, I felt as if he understood my feelings. He had probably sensed the earlier confrontation and the tension between us. Our home, though filled with darkness for him, was familiar ground. Even without sight, he could navigate it with ease. Perhaps he had come to check on me, concerned to find me alone and upset. I clung to this sturdy frame, allowing myself to cry freely. I had always cherished caring for him. These moments were precious and gave my life purpose. Yet the change in my ex-husband was painful. The kindness he once showed at the beginning of our marriage had turned into coldness over time, leaving me deeply hurt. I wondered if my focus on his small actions and words was merely a way of justifying my feelings. About 10 years later, feeling a need to break away from my routine, I ventured out for the first time in a while. As I entered the shopping mall, the fresh air, sparkling shop fronts, and the smiles of people around me lifted my spirits. It felt as if the gloomy clouds over my heart were clearing. Then, a voice cut through the pleasant moment, bringing with it a rush of painful memories. "Oh, how many years has it been? Is my dad still alive?" The familiar voice made me tremble. It was my ex-husband. For a moment, everything went dark, but I gathered the courage to look at him. He wore the same smug smile as always, and the unpleasant memories of our past resurfaced. Taking a deep breath, I stared at him, unflinching. I was no longer swayed by his words. I looked him squarely in the eyes, shaking off the shadows of the past and reaffirming my resolve to move forward. When my ex-husband appeared unexpectedly, I was momentarily taken aback and stayed silent. He broke the silence with a smirk. "Aren't you going to say anything? Are you shy after all this time?" I decided to let my mischievous side show and told him about my father-in-law's passing and how I had inherited $7 million. His eyes widened in shock, and I couldn't help but laugh at his astonishment. The thrill of seeing his reaction was exhilarating, and I silently reveled in the moment. "Want to grab a coffee and chat?" I suggested, not really planning to delve further into the inheritance but curious to catch up after such a long time. We sat down, and I mustered the courage to ask about his current situation. He spoke quite openly about his job, revealing that he was doing something different now. His unchanged arrogance was a bit irritating, but I stayed calm, observing his reactions. "So, how are things with the daughter of that company president?" I asked, teasing him slightly. From what he mentioned about his new job, I guess he might have left his previous company. If so, things might not be going smoothly with his new situation. He looked momentarily perplexed, then sighed and said in a low voice, "To be honest, things are a bit rocky, but who cares? Is the inheritance story true? Did you really get $7 million? Share some with me." His clear expectation made me chuckle. "Why should I share?" I replied, "Your name was indeed in the will." His face showed a mix of surprise and anger as he blurted out, "Why didn't you tell me? I can't believe you." Feigning surprise, I said, "Oh, you wanted to hear. I'm sorry." A smirk tugged at my lips as I observed the shock on my ex-husband's face. Inside, I felt a deep sigh. "You know," I began, "I tried calling you several times back then, but you never answered. I wanted to inform you about your father's passing. In the end, I couldn't reach you, and in his will, your name was indeed listed. However, it clearly stated that you were not to receive a penny. Should I have still informed you?" I asked, letting a hint of sarcasm color my voice as I faced his bewildered expression. My mind drifted back to last fall when my father-in-law passed away peacefully. By then, it had been 9 years since our divorce. One evening, I spent some quiet time with him. Usually, he'd fall asleep as soon as he lay down, but that night was different. He sat there, wide awake, showing no signs of sleep. Noting his unusual demeanor, I asked, "What's the matter? If you're cold, I can bring you a warmer blanket." He simply pointed to a small box. "Open this box tomorrow and call the person whose business card is inside," he instructed in a calm, deliberate tone. "Do you have any plans?" I asked. He gently shook his head with a smile. "No, but look forward to your birthday this year." Every year, my father-in-law would give me something special, a tradition he maintained thanks to the support from his previous employer before he lost his sight. Even after our divorce, his support allowed me to lead a comfortable life without needing to work. The morning after our conversation, the house was unusually silent. The comforting sound of his breathing, which I had grown accustomed to, was absent. The room was still, and I could only sense the passage of time. "Good morning," I whispered to the empty room. I softly called out, expecting to hear the familiar response of "good morning," but that day was different. An unsettling silence filled the room, and a deep sense of dread began to settle in. I quietly examined my father-in-law's face, and it hit me, he wasn't breathing. His usually calm and steady breaths were absent, and his face, though peaceful, showed no sign of life. When I held his hand, the warmth I'd grown used to was gone, replaced by an unnerving chill. My heart sank as I realized his heart had stopped beating. Panicked, I called for an ambulance, but grief overwhelmed me as memories of his kindness and love surged back. Tears streamed down my face as I recalled the time we spent together, the warmth of his smile, the meals we shared, and his unwavering support even after he went blind. His immense love for me would forever remain in my heart. Wiping my tears away, I gently held his hand and whispered "thank you" over and over, even though he was no longer with me. His kindness and the memories of our time together would continue to support me. As I tried to compose myself, I noticed a letterbox that reminded me of our conversation the previous night. I carefully opened it to find a business card with a lawyer's name. Tears flowed once more as I recalled his warm voice. I dialed the number on the card. After the funeral, I met with the lawyer, who revealed the details of my father-in-law's will. I had inherited more than I had ever imagined from his past company and family wealth accumulated over generations. There was even a clause stipulating that not a single penny would go to my ex-husband. It was clear how much my father-in-law had thought ahead and cared for me. I understood now why my ex-husband was unaware of this. My father-in-law had anticipated our future and kept this from him. Now, with my father-in-law's wishes close to my heart, I found myself sitting across from my ex-husband in a cafe. He looked shocked and confused as I prepared to start a new chapter of my life. With a soft, pleading tone, he said, "Lily, please forgive me. I've reflected on my mistakes. Can we start over?" His desperation was evident, but I met his plea with a smile. I looked at him and said, "Lily? Who's that? My name is Millie. Have you forgotten? I placed the receipt on the table, turned on my heel, and walked out of the cafe. The fresh outdoor air was invigorating, making me feel like a new person. I headed straight to my trusted lawyer's office, equipped with all the necessary details about my ex-husband's recent whereabouts. I was determined to pursue alimony from him. Living in the apartment I had purchased with my inheritance felt like a dream. The views from the windows, the new furniture, and the fresh interior made each day fulfilling and joyful. Occasionally, my lawyer would update me on my ex-husband's situation. It seemed he had been abandoned by the daughter of the company president and had fallen into gambling. The alimony I was requesting only added to the pressure of his already strained situation. Hearing about his struggles made me even more grateful for my new life. My ex-husband tried to contact me through the lawyer, but my lawyer graciously declined on my behalf. This gesture warmed my heart and reminded me of our earlier conversations about my ex. Life was evidently tough for him now. Already burdened by gambling debts, he now had to contend with paying me alimony and juggling various jobs beyond just construction work. I hoped he would learn from his past mistakes and move forward with reflection. On the other hand, each day for me was filled with joy and excitement. My inheritance gave me the opportunity to pursue a long-held dream, opening a flower shop. My father-in-law had always enjoyed having flowers around the house, and it had been a small daily pleasure for him. In his memory, I decided to follow that dream. Now, as I stand on the brink of launching my flower shop, I feel truly joyous and content. My gratitude for my father-in-law's kindness and support is deeply etched in my heart. His legacy has helped me accept the painful past with my ex-husband. Though there are still moments of sadness and regret, I feel like I'm making progress toward my dreams every day. Recalling the days with my ex used to bring tears, but those feelings have significantly subsided. I am now embracing the journey of finding my own happiness, living life at my own pace, and working toward my goals. Each day is a small happiness in itself, and I feel incredibly fulfilled.